When Pat's parents retired to Florida, a series of circumstances brought them to attending the UU Church of North Palm Beach, where Roger Cowan was then pastor. His wisdom, warmth, and good humor contributed in large measure to their decision to join the church. Pat and I met Roger a couple times when we were visiting with her folks. I remember him as a big bear of a man with a beard, a mellifluous, deep voice. He walked with a cane, as various health issues were beginning to catch up with him. Roger succumbed to those issues a few years after Pat's parents joined the church, but they and the whole congregation had been profoundly influenced by him and remembered him fondly. Now, to help you understand Roger's opening anecdote in the sermon, let me also mention that it's my understanding that he was a bit of a snowbird. In the winters, he pastored at Palm Beach County, Florida, and in the summers, he went north to Maine for a period of time, and I believe he did some summer stock theater while he was there. Again, Roger's sermon is entitled, Not Quite Perfect. It's been 8 years now, but I'll never forget it. One bright August Sunday morning, I walked into Brooks Drug Store in Belfast, Maine. I picked up a copy of the Boston Globe, eager to read it as I enjoyed blueberry pancakes and coffee just down the street. Before me on the drugstore counter lay a lone tube of toothpaste, which I assumed a clerk must be planning to put on a shelf. Just as I placed my paper by the cash register, a tall man elbowed me aside, paid his bill, turned from me, and scooped up the toothpaste and left. Any serenity I'd felt that morning was gone. I hadn't seen the man with the toothpaste, didn't even know he was in the store. Why couldn't he have waited 30 seconds for me to get my paper? Well, who did he think he was? How rude could these Maine people be? That wouldn't happen where I live, where everyone is always genteel and polite. My anger grew with each second that passed. I knew what I must do. I'd catch up with him in the parking lot and tell him off. I'd also tell him that I was a visitor in Maine, but that if everyone I met was as crude and selfish as he was, there wouldn't be any tourists to support his otherwise pretty recessive state. I ran out the door to find him, but I was too late. He was already in his car, headed toward the street. I barely caught a glimpse of his license plate. It read, Palm Beach County. An hour later, comforted by blueberry pancakes and sausages, I did a little self-searching. Why do I always assume that I am the good guy? Pleasantly striding through life with good cheer and goodwill to everyone I meet. Why had I assumed that I was owed an apology for so slight an ill manner? And why did I automatically assume the man was from Maine, not from my state, let alone my county? Then I got angry with me for making a mountain out of a molehill, for allowing a perfect stranger to temporarily live rent-free in my head, for allowing a beautiful morning by an awesome ocean to be sabotaged by a tube of Colgate. Today, I want to talk with you about anger, especially being angry with ourselves. I get angry at me when I prove myself less than my expectations of me. Do you have unreal expectations of you? Are you, like me, one bundle of purity, continually running up against an impure world? Are you a perfect paragon of peace, always being interrupted by hostile, self-centered strangers? Do even loved ones and friends sometimes question your innocence and insight and suggest that you may sometimes be, dare I say it, wrong? I don't know where our illusions about ourselves come from, but I suspect they come from two things. First, our unwillingness to accept ourselves with imperfections, and thus confront our defects of character. Second, our illusions come from our liberal religious tradition itself. Both Unitarianism and Universalism have their roots in the upbeat Age of Enlightenment. They were necessary antidotes to the gloom and doom, the judgment and harshness of second-generation Protestantism, as well as the dour legalism of Roman Catholicism. Onward and upward was the Universalist call, coupled with the promise that all people would be saved by a merciful God. Meanwhile, science and sound psychology were Unitarian trademarks. In an age of reason, men and women would stand on their own 2 feet, think their own thoughts, freely make their own progress. There was no limit to how far we could go if we just believed in the possibility of intelligence plus hard work, in the inherent worth of each individual, in the fundamental goodness of humanity, the positive, upbeat power of being good people in a good world. That has been our faith and our fantasy. And let's be glad that rational thought and high ideals have accomplished all that they have in human achievement. But Judaism has never been so naive. Judaism sees us as flawed, a little lower than the angels. That's why each fall Jews celebrate Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The faithful gather in homes and synagogues and temples, acknowledging every individual's need for contrition, forgiveness, at-one-ment, and reconciliation. While Judaism at its best is rational and hopeful about this world and its future, Judaism also teaches that we are less than perfect, that we will sometimes fail neighbors and mates, children and friends, and most of all, ourselves. Why does this imperfection make us so angry at ourselves? The word angry derives from the Latin angor, which means to press tight, to throttle. In German, the word Angst means fear, and in Dutch, the word eng means both narrow and uncanny. So the word angry includes elements of fear, uncanniness, and narrowness. The late Peter Fleck wrote that anger, quote, is claustrophobic. There is no exit, no way out. That is why anger is so often explosive and uncontrolled. Still, we must do something to control our anger, whether it's aimed at ourselves or someone else. Often they go together, end quote. In the old story from Genesis, Joseph's brothers were jealous of and angry at him for the superior status he had achieved in Egypt. He had played a cat and mouse game with them, testing their love for their youngest brother Benjamin, and they were angry about that. But they were also angry at themselves for having allowed Joseph to manipulate them, for not having been as smart as he was, and for needing him now because of the power he had. And their anger at themselves incapacitated them, just as it sometimes does us. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" And his brothers could not answer him because they were angry at his presence. Then Joseph assuaged their anger. And Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, I pray you." And they came near. And he said, "I am Joseph, your brother whom you sold into Egypt. Now, therefore do not be grieved, nor angry with yourselves that you sold me. For God sent me before you to preserve life, to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance." Joseph made it easier for his brothers to forgive themselves, to get rid of their anger. And as soon as they had forgiven themselves, they were able to respond and function. And he kissed all his brothers and wept with them, and after that his brothers talked with him. Anger at ourselves consumes our energy. Freedom from anger releases it. We all waste time and energy when we allow anger to be aimed at our imperfections or those of others. I just lost it, we blushingly admit. In shame, we sense that anger must be used sparingly and appropriately. It must be reserved for the defense of those less privileged than we, for furthering causes that are socially just. My colleague, Forrest Church, says that often we are like the Siamese fighting fish. That fish is a macho mini-monster, the featherweight champion of the fish world. Hold a mirror in front of a Siamese fighting fish, let it see its own reflection, and it immediately becomes a tiger. It fans its fins and its full battle regalia and attacks its own image, an imagined enemy. So often do we. One woman said, when I see myself in my mother, some irritating trait, her tendency to rationalize, I get angry, not just at myself, but at her. But not really. For just as the fish sees something it doesn't like in its own reflection and attacks, the woman really saw herself in her mother. The closer we are to people in relationship, the more we see their frailties and the more easily we get angry. We tend to resemble our closest relatives in temperament and character, in their quirks and habits and weaknesses. We see ourselves reflected. It's particularly distressing with our kids when we see them replaying one of our character defects, destroying our hope that they might have missed a trait we don't like in ourselves. But being angry with ourselves is a barren occupation. It's like guilt. It wages a losing battle with the past. What's done is done. And we have to live with it, even when it's hurtful, shameful, imperfect. There's the right word, imperfect. Our anger at ourselves, like my anger at me that day in Maine, is aimed at our imperfection. We want to be perfect. We want to say and do the proper thing, to stand always for good things toward everybody, parents, lovers, children, friends. We want to be perfect Unitarian Universalists, incarnate examples of truth, goodness, and virtue, forever setting a good example and hopefully being recognized for it. Forget it. The Jews are right. Reality isn't structured that way. There are no good guys and bad guys, just imperfect people destined to live with our imperfections. Is this stoic? No. We don't just accept our imperfections, period. We must try continually to do something about them. Like saying, I'm sorry, when we've hurt someone with a sharp word. When we make amends, make up for those deeds we've done that have hurt someone beyond the power of a slighting remark or a bully at the checkout counter. Just don't be too hard on yourself if the result of your amend isn't perfect. Very little in life is. It's time we did away with our effort to be perfect people who belong to a perfect denomination in a potentially perfect world. So long as people like you and me inhabit it, this will not be a perfect planet. But it can be a better planet because you and I and others work at it, and the place to begin is with ourselves. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said some penetrating words. Somebody said, it isn't that Jesus' way of life has been tried and found wanting. It's just that it's been found difficult and not tried. We might try these words on for size. If you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother has a just grievance against you, leave your gift before the altar and first go, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. We could do a lot worse, my friends. First, be reconciled. Then come and offer your gift. The best offering we can bring is a forgiven and forgiving heart. When any life or any church majors in forgiveness, that life or that church will still be imperfect, but it will also be accepting, open-hearted, and best of all, free of illusions and real. May it be so with us. Amen.